All right, so I'm going to start off by initializing a package manager. You could use yarn. I'm just using npm. So I'm going to do an npm init-y. And I'm assuming you know how Chrome extensions work. I'm assuming you know how ReactJS apps work. I'm assuming you know how Webpack works. I won't be going over the code or how these things work in extreme detail. I'll have links in the description below to videos I did on these topics, except for the Webpack. I'll link you to a playlist I used to get up to speed on how Webpack works. I will, however, go through the workflow, the logic flow of what we're doing line by line if need be. So I'm going to do a control V of a bunch of modules or packages I've installed. I'll have a link to a Medium article I wrote on this topic. You'll get all the code there. So control V. So these are all the dev dependencies. We'll do some non-dev dependencies after this is installed. And we'll just get the 3 non-dev dependencies. Of course, we're going to need npm install. We'll need React, React DOM, and we don't need React Router DOM to get a basic boilerplate, you could say, pipeline going from a ReactJS app into a Chrome extension. I've just included it for this tutorial to show you that you can absolutely have navigation within your ReactJS app and have that navigation translate into a Chrome extension. So React, React DOM, and React Router DOM. All right, so we have all of the packages installed. What should we do first? How about let's do the package JSON first, then we'll move to manifest JSON, and then I'll explain to you how you should be thinking about writing your ReactJS app so that it can convert into a Chrome extension. And then finally, we'll tackle the most important file in this whole tutorial, which is the webpack.config js. So let's start with the package JSON. Let me close this guy right here. Name, whatever you want, version doesn't matter, description, main. We don't really need this at all for development. There's 2 modes to this, development mode and production mode. We don't need the main attribute or property or key at all for both of those modes. I'm just going to name this another file other than the Webpack though. Just going to do index dot, what should we do? Pop-up options, whatever, popup.js. Scripts, we're going to need to write 2 scripts, one for 2 modes, developer mode and production mode. We'll come back to that after we've discussed the dependencies. And so the problem we're trying to solve, and I've solved, is how do we write a ReactJS app and convert that into a Chrome extension? The answer is Webpack, and specifically Babel in Webpack. We need to convert all that JSX code, the ReactJS, into just purely JavaScript code with links to files adhered to or completed, so that when you have we're going to output to a folder, anyone with a browser can load up that extension. They don't need to have Webpack installed. And so we do that with Babel. Babel is a package or a piece of software that transpiles one language into another language. This is what Babel Core is. Babel Loader is specific for Webpack. Babel Loader allows Webpack to use Babel Core. These 3 guys right here, preset React, tells Babel how to transpile or convert JSX code into JavaScript code. Preset env tells Babel how do you convert any sort of JavaScript code into other JavaScript code. So ES5 into ES6, basically a catch-all for JavaScript, standalone JavaScript code. Plugin proposal class properties that tells Babel how to transpile ReactJS, specifically class components, into JavaScript. If we didn't have this guy right here, we wouldn't be able to write class components. We need this guy to write class components, not simply functional or function components in React. Clean Webpack plugin. What does this guy do? This is just for development and for production purposes. It deletes all the files in a folder or on your dev server before building out to that same directory or to that same server. It just keeps your file structure clean. Copy Webpack. This just tells the Webpack, I need to copy some files from one location to another. Don't transpile them. Don't minify them. Don't alter them or transform them in any way. So as is, just copy them from one directory into another. We need this guy specifically for background.js, the inject script.js, the manifest, and the images. We want to get these guys into an output directory, but we don't want to go through any of the transforming properties of Webpack. Just copy these files as they are from one directory to another. HTML loader tells Webpack how to deal with HTML files. HTML Webpack plugin tells your Webpack, I want you to take the HTML files that you're converting or transforming and output them either to a server or to a directory on your local hard drive. This allows us to basically export HTML files. And of course, we need the actual software, Webpack, which is these three guys. Webpack, Webpack CLI, and the dev server when we're developing the ReactJS app. Dependencies here, of course, React DOM. You don't need this one. I've just included this one. So that's the package JSON. Let's write those two scripts, so two different modes. When we're doing the development mode, we'll just run a build script. We're just going to run the command webpack dev server. When we want to ship this out for production, so export it to a directory, we're going to run the build:production script. And all this is going to do is you can do a webpack with a -p for production. So all it does is tell Webpack, hey, use Babel to transpile, but also minify the code. So take out all of the empty spaces and then switch out variable names for like A, B, C. Basically shrink the file size as small as is possible. That's what the -p production of Webpack does. So that's the package JSON. Let's move on to the manifest JSON. Manifest. So you notice here, there's none of this is ReactJS at all. It's a basic, generic, boilerplate Chrome extension written in JavaScript. Nothing here says ReactJS. So we have icons, we have our background script, options page, pop-up page, and permissions. So that's basically it for the manifest. Close this. And now how should we think about writing our ReactJS app, the logic flow, in order to get it to later convert into a Chrome extension? Let's start with the pop-up and options. And so normally when we write a Chrome extension, all the stuff so the pop-up HTML would be this. Let's say I go to my Chrome browser. I had the extension installed in the upper right here. I click on that extension icon. The pop-up.html is what I would see. Normally, we'd write that code here. Let's say we wanted an H1, blah, blah, in there. This is not how a ReactJS app works, though. All ReactJS needs from your HTML file is a div with an ID. It then hooks into this div and injects the JSX, which gets compiled down to JavaScript, into this div, this page here. And so our pop-up.html for when we're developing a Chrome extension using ReactJSX, it's simply a boilerplate HTML file with a div with a special ID. We then use a script, this is pop-up right here, which captures that div and injects a ReactJS component, or you could write the component or all of the code in here. It's just going to look really ugly. And so I've just separated that out into a separate component, pop-up, which is this guy right here. And so all of this code is going to be what's rendered on screen for that pop-up. It's just an H1 with Chrome extension pop-up, and this horizontal carousel I've just written. I'll link this down in the description below, or card on the top right. This doesn't come with ReactJS. It's a video tutorial I did, 2-3 months ago, just to show you something other than text on screen. And so that's the logic flow of building a Chrome extension using ReactJS. The pop-up, you put nothing here that gets rendered to the screen. Simply a div with the ID. You have a script that captures that div with the ID, injects ReactJS components, and this is what gets rendered to the screen. So that logic flow holds true for the options as well. Options, simple div with an ID. The script that injects the ReactJS, the JSX, which is this guy right here. Capture that, inject component options. And what did I write for the options? What's all this? Oh, okay, there we go. This is where I use the React Router DOM. It's just going to have 3 links. We click on those links, and we're going to route to these different pages, the options, the foreground, and the pop-up. And so something very important to know here. When we're developing our Chrome extension using ReactJS, the foreground script is developed exactly like the options and pop-up. So foreground is your HTML with a div, the JavaScript, which injects where is it? Right here, captures that div, injects a component, and the foreground component is that guy right here, just an H1. This is not the same logic you use for production of your Chrome extension. And why is that? So let's say we had a page here. Let's go to google.com. So no internet. Let me turn on my internet for a second. All right, so google.com, we'll do Control-Shift-J. And this is the Google landing page. It has the doc type right up here, it has HTML, head, body, all of this stuff. It's a fully functioning index.html setup. We can't inject all of this into the page the user is viewing, or else we'd have two doc types, two HTMLs, two heads, two bodies. It would break their page. We just need this guy to be injected into the page the user's viewing. How do we get this guy into their tree so that we can attach our JSX or JSX compiled down into JavaScript? Well, that's where the background script comes in. This has nothing to do with specifically ReactJS. There's no JSX code in this. All it says is, based on what tab the user has opened, inject or run this script, inject script, which is down here. What this inject script does is it basically just builds this guy in JavaScript, div with a foreground ID, which is create an element div, foreground ID. We're attaching in the future, there's going to be something called a bundle. This is your ReactJSX compiled down into JavaScript. So attach that to this div here, and then inject all of those into the page. So basically, construct this in JavaScript, inject it into their tree, and then in the background, after we've successfully injected that div, that entry point, then inject the JSX, the ReactJS, the actual app, the thing that's going to render to the screen, which gets made later. The naming convention is the name.bundle.js. Bundle, so you know it was transformed by Webpack. So let me just go over that very quickly again. When we're developing our foreground, the page that we want to inject into the page the user's viewing, when we're developing it, it's just like the workflow of options and pop-up. You have an HTML file with a div. You have this file right here, which captures that div, injects some sort of component. That component's here. For production of the foreground, this file is completely useless. We just need this guy. And so we have our background, which injects a script that creates this guy right here. And then we inject these guys. These guys get compiled down into one file. That's the foreground bundle, the JSX code. So let me close this. And this will make a lot more sense when we actually see it in action. Close this, close this, close this, close this. And so that's the foreground. So we've covered the options page, the pop-up, and the foreground page, or the content script written in the Google extension docs. They refer to the foreground as the content script. All right, so what should we do now? Should I explain Webpack? No, not yet. How about this? Let's get it up and running in a developer mode, and then I'll show you how we can actually write the code that gets shown on screen. How do we edit this thing? So we'll just spin up the console like this, and we'll do what should we do? npm, it was run build. All right, so successfully compiled. Let's go to, let me close this. And so when we're editing the Chrome extension being written in JSX or with JSX as a ReactJS app, we can't do this. We can't load this extension. Let's say we were on the Chrome extension, the source folder. Right now, the source folder has all our files, the options, the pop-up, the icon, the manifest. If we load that in here, select that, we actually get it loaded into the browser. But when we click on the pop-up page to show, there's nothing here. We can't edit the ReactJS app through the browser, through a Chrome extension. We have to do it traditionally, how you edit any ReactJS app, which is through your local host. So let me remove this. This is only supposed to be used for the production side. So remove this. And if we go back here, we can see that the web dev server is hosting our ReactJS app on port. Which port is it? There we go. Localhost 8080. So let me minimize this just a bit. There we go. And let's go to localhost 8080. And there's cannot get. That's because there's no index.html file here. In a normal ReactJS app, there would be an index.html. We're developing for a Chrome extension. Chrome extensions don't use index.html. They use, per their conventions, pop-up options, and this should really be content script or whatever. I just name it foreground. And so to see these pages, we actually have to manually navigate towards them. So let's go which one first? Let's go to the pop-up first. And then we'll go to foreground, and then we'll go to options. So pop-up.html. There we go. That was that Chrome extension pop-up. And that's the horizontal carousel, just to show you that you can, all of the ReactJS components you've probably written in your past, you can absolutely import them and use them in your Chrome extension. This is just the horizontal carousel I created. Let's go to the foreground script, which is just an H1, should be just an H1. There we go, Chrome extension foreground. Let's go to the options, which use the React router DOM, which was options.html. And there we go. Let's click on the pop-up. So again, just to show you that it's completely modular, that's the exact same pop-up that we had on the popup.html. It's just imported within the options page. Still works. There we go. Let's click the foreground. There we go. Back to the options. There we go. Foreground, pop-up. All right, good. Let's close that. So that's how we develop. Actually, before we even do that, let me show you. That's how we develop our apps. Let's do, what should we do? Let's go to options page. Options.html. So let's do this. Can I do this? Perfect. Right side, good. Let's alter the background color of the options, which is, again, what gets rendered out on the screen is the component. So options, let's just go down here. And let's just do a background color of red. See if that works in real time. There we go. So that's how you develop in real time your ReactJS app. How do we export this into an actual production line for anyone to download from the web store and use in their browser? Close this. Let's get rid of that red. Get rid of that. Save. Let's go back to full screen with these guys. Okay, that brings us to the most important file in this tutorial. Let me close these. This guy right here. So again, I'm assuming you know how Webpack works, but I'll go line by line why I wrote all this. And so path, require the path. We need absolute paths in our in this Webpack config. So we just import the path. This is it comes with npm, so it's not specifically, you don't have to download it. HTML Webpack plugin allows us to export the HTML files either onto the server or onto the local hard drive. The copy Webpack, copy files as is, do not transform them. Clean Webpack, make sure the directories are cleaned up before we build onto the server or on the production, and module.exports. This dev server is required by ReactJS. If you don't have this, your ReactJS app will not work in the development environment. Content base tells the server to draw from the source folder. That's how we could navigate to the options and pop-up. And history API fallback, that's just to allow navigation within your ReactJS app. Now the entry points, we need 3 entry points for this. This is what gets converted down into, from JSX down into JavaScript. We have 3 entry points because we need 3 of these bundles. We basically have, if you want to think about it, if you had a create React app, if you download or use npx create React app, some name, it would have 1 entry point, the index.js, and it would build from there. Our little Chrome extension ReactJS hybrid thing, it technically has 3 entry points, 3 index.js files. So that's why we have these 3 entry points. They build separate bundles of JSX compiled down into JavaScript code to be used by the pop-up, the options, and the foreground. The output is how they should be named. That's why you saw you could say index foreground.bundle.js. We had I think it was index foreground.bundle.js. It might just be foreground.bundle.js. Let me do this just to make sure. I want to give you guys the wrong information. It is going to be, so it's just going to be the name, foreground.bundle.js. It's going to be options.bundle.js and popup.bundle.js. And we're going to output into a folder called dist. You can name this folder whatever you want. Production, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter. It's going to create a new folder and output all of our files into this folder right here, dist. Now, module is where we define the rules, basically telling Webpack how do you deal with certain files in your chain. For JavaScript files in the chain, not all JavaScript files in this directory, these guys don't get touched by this rule. Background.js, inject script.js. Anything in the chain which starts from your entry points. Use the Babel loader. Handle the JavaScript in that code. Handle the JSX in that code. Handle the class components in that code. Right here we have a test for HTML files in the chain. Just handle the HTML files in that code. Plugins get run after individual files get transformed. What we're saying is output the pop-up HTML on the server. Depends on if we're doing -p or not. In terms of development, output it onto the dev server. If we're doing production, output it to the dist folder. So we want a popup.html, options.html, and this guy, that special case I told you. Now for development, this is okay. For production, if we have this line or these lines of code in our production, when we run that command, it's going to output a foreground.html page in the dist. This doesn't really matter because we don't use foreground.html. It's basically a dead file in the folder. So if you care about keeping your directories clean, what you do before we ship to production is you can either delete this or I just comment it out. And so when we ship to production, there's going to be no foreground.html. So let me just reiterate that again. If we have this on, it's going to create a file in our Chrome extension folder called foreground.html. This file doesn't get used at all. So you can basically have it just sitting there. But if you care about keeping your directories clean, you comment this out and there's no file produced. So that's for the HTML files. And then finally, the copy Webpack. These are the files we want untouched by Webpack's transformations. The manifest, the background, the inject script, and all of the images. And finally, the clean Webpack plugin. So let's go ahead and ship this to production. So we're just going to do Control-C to stop the development server. We're going to want this uncommented, or commented, doesn't really matter. You save this, and we're going to run the script. So what was it, npm, we'll do a run, we'll do, what was it, build, :production. All right, so successfully built. Notice on the left, it created that folder, that dist folder. This is the Chrome extension. This is what you would pack and upload or publish to the web store. Let's load the Chrome extension in the browser. So we go to our browser, we do load unpacked. We go to the dist folder that we named it, double click, select this folder. Let's pin it to the browser bar. And let's look at the pop-up page. So left click. And the reason it takes so long to load is because these images are being fetched from a server called Pixum. If these images were on your local hard drive, it wouldn't take that long to load this pop-up. And so there's the pop-up page working flawlessly. That's the ReactJS app or component. Let's go to the options page. So right click, options. Let's click on pop-up. There we go. Working flawlessly. Let's go to foreground. There we go. Back to pop-up. There we go. Now let's handle or see how the foreground script gets handled. So let's go to Google's webpage. There we go. You Control-Shift-J, go to Elements, and there we go. So we injected that entry point for the JavaScript, the ReactJS, the JSX. Convert it down, inject it in here, and we have all of that Chrome extension foreground injected into the page the user's viewing. So I can go to xe.com, which is a currency conversion site, and you'll get the exact same behavior. That foreground ReactJS app page injected onto their page. Now the reason why it looks like this probably has to do with the stylings of their page, conflicting with the stylings of our page, but it's still right there. So let me close this, just close this, and close this. And so there you have it. That's how you write a Chrome extension using ReactJS. And so let me leave you guys with this. This solution is my solution. I've looked on Google, I've looked on the web, I've looked on YouTube for a solution on how to write a Chrome extension using ReactJS. The only ones I found were ones that injected your ReactJS app into the pop-up page here, but they didn't handle the options or the foreground, the content script, which makes for an incomplete Chrome extension. So I think this is a first. With that said, this is my solution. It's a bit hacky in that depending on if you're doing developer or production mode, and if you care about the cleanliness of your directories, you're going to have to manually comment this in and out. So just understand this. I haven't tested for all of the possible node packages that you could use with your ReactJS app. I've tested React Router DOM and my own custom components, but your favorite package that you usually use or packages that you use might conflict or might not work given this logic flow. If they don't, just message me, Twitter or Instagram or email, or leave a comment in the comment sections and I'll try and make it work. But just understand that this is my solution. It's probably the first one out there, so it is all experimental. And so leave a like if this helped you at all. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I will see you guys in the next one.